When you're a new mom, the overwhelming pressure you feel of having to make sure this baby is okay is real. And so you want to make sure you're doing everything you possibly can to support your body through that process, because you're a mom now. You're raising somebody else. You're keeping this little tiny thing alive.
All right, welcome back to the Pregnancy and Birth Made Easy podcast. I think this interview might be the one I am most excited about for the entire year of 2024. So with me today, I have Candi Frazer, and she is a board-certified holistic nutritionist, and she's the owner of Primal Bod. And I'm going to have her kind of introduce herself in a moment a little bit more. I want you guys to hear from her how she got started into what she's doing today, and why it is so important in the world today. But I want to tell you just a little bit about where I found Candi. So my husband was actually looking at stuff. I think he had found one of your videos on TikTok. He was looking at stuff, and I was telling him, I have to re-record my course. So for those of you who are waiting for course updates, here's why I have not done it yet. I was looking to re-record my course, and I recorded it several years ago, and I've gained a little bit of weight since then, even though I had been trying to do some things fairly healthy. And I was looking for like a quick fix, kind of like, I'm like talking to my husband, Michael, I just need like a 6-week program. I just need something that'll kind of like get me back to where I need to be. And at the time I was actually looking at bodybuilding. There's like a bodybuilding place near us, and I was looking to hire them. And I thought maybe I'll do that. But I was also having some digestive issues and other things. And I'm like, maybe I need to meet with a holistic nutritionist. So I had some different people that I was talking to and stuff on the back burner. And my husband came upon Candi's information, and he's like, you need to listen to her with this science and stuff that I've studied. He did, microbiology and chemistry and all this stuff. He goes, what she's talking about is dead on. And I haven't heard somebody talk about it like this before. You need to look into it. So I watched, you have a pre-recorded webinar, which I'm going to link to everything that we're talking about today. It'll be in the show notes for you guys. Watch the pre-recorded webinar, and I was hooked. I attended her live Zoom that she does after that. And I got to ask questions directly. And I think Tom was her husband. Your husband was chatting with me in the chat during that time as well. And I'm sitting there like, why is this all making sense? When you're hearing truth and you're just like, you're eating it up because you're like, this is real. That's what I was experiencing when I was listening to this. So I got into Primal Bod. I bought the program. And 5 weeks later, at the end of 5 weeks, because I thought in my head that was my 6-week picture, but it was actually the end of 5 weeks, I had lost not just 13 pounds, I took 10 years off of myself. Like looking at the picture side by side, I looked 10 years younger. I felt 10 years younger. I could not believe all of the things that had changed for me in such a positive way. All that digestive stuff that I was worried about, physically, how I was looking and feeling, it blew my mind. And very much the way that birth has blown my mind. When you guys know my story, and when I came up to giving birth that final time where I had a home birth and it was unmedicated, and I was like, all the odds were stacked against me, but I knew all the truth that I had learned, and I had this great experience. That is exactly how I feel about what I've experienced through Primal Bod. So Candi, in case you don't know a little bit about my testimony about your program, there it is. I have been floored with the results, and it's not just because I look good. It is a complete transformation of my entire lifestyle, and it has a huge, huge impact on myself, and I hope the world as you continue to spread your knowledge. But with that, will you take a moment and kind of talk about how you got into doing what you do today? And even from the start of, because I know a little bit of your background with that first baby, having your baby, and kind of what your postpartum and all that looked like.
Yes. Well, thank you, Stephanie. That's quite the introduction. And I loved working with you right away. And, honestly, you're doing the job that I wanted to do second in line. And first in line, I wanted to be a midwife. And I know we had talked about this, but before I became a nutritionist, way before actually, I had thought about venturing out into midwifery and didn't do it at the time because my kids were too little, and skipped that part of my life that I really, really was interested in helping pregnant and nursing moms. It's always been a really big passion of mine. Even though I'm not working with pregnant and nursing moms right now, it still is a very big passion of mine to help support women through pregnancy and nursing. So this is just a bucket list item for me to be able to get on and talk to your audience and you, and just tell you what I would have done over, knowing what I know now, what I would have done differently with my own pregnancies and raising my children. So thank you for having me on. It all really started with just an interest in nutrition. I've been a nutritionist, board certified in holistic nutrition for 10 years now. I had a practice before I founded the Primal Bod. I had a practice and I was seeing clients in my practice, and I was really busy. I was booked out. It was hard to get into me because I used supplements and herbs. I'm an herbalist. I did homeopathy and I just did things different. And I think people in today's world are really looking for the truth, as you were, you and your husband, you're looking for the truth. I was too. I wanted to get to the root of it. I never believed that an orange bottle was going to help me. I never believed that. And so when I became a nutritionist, it was always just kind of a part of me. I always knew there was something better. I have been doing nutrition for 10 years now and helping people with supplements. And then, I met my husband, Tom, and he is a type 1 diabetic. And that kind of put a whole new spin on life for me. So at the time, I was eating pretty much a paleo type diet. I was eating fruits, vegetables, meat, organic, everything. And I thought I was doing the right thing. And it was what I was taught in school, and I wasn't eating copious amounts of carbs or fruits or anything like that, but I'd have a smoothie on occasion, and that would be like a treat. And, I ate dates and, I'd have some nuts and seeds and stuff like that at the time. So I thought I was doing the right thing. And after, getting together with Tom, I quickly realized that I probably wasn't, because his blood sugar was a disaster. And I was horrified. I had never really been around a type 1 diabetic. So for those of you in your audience that don't know the difference, type 1s are diagnosed when they're in their teenage years and their pancreas just stops producing insulin. Where type 2, you're usually diagnosed later in your life, or can be sometimes through pregnancy too. You can develop gestational diabetes, but you develop it later in life after you've had too much sugar for too long. And so he couldn't help it. They believe it's an autoimmune condition. They really don't know. They really don't understand type 1 diabetes or how it forms. And so he's always had to give himself insulin. And the only time I think like looking back, was aware of how stressful type 1 diabetes was watching the movie Steel Magnolias. And that scene where Julia Roberts is sitting in Trudy's hair salon and she's type 1 diabetic in the movie. And she has her low and she starts shaking and it looks like she's convulsing, which doesn't happen in real life, but it looked scary. She's sweating and they have to give her orange juice and get her to suck on some candy to raise her blood sugar. And I thought that must be terrifying. And then I married a type 1 diabetic and it was terrifying. We did have moments like that. And I vowed to him that I wasn't going to let that happen because I married this brilliant, smart, successful guy. And I hated seeing him waste his time on his insulin pump. So I just devoted myself to figuring out how to balance his blood sugar. And I knew he needed to eat low carb. So we started with just eating meat and vegetables. And, I had done keto diet several times prior to trying to get him to eat a little low carb. I had already played around with it. So I wasn't expecting anything to change in my own body. But what I learned through trying to help him and watch his insulin pump and watch his blood sugar levels was that I finally understood that it wasn't just a low carb game. Because all meat breaks down to glucose and fat slows the absorption of insulin. So I had these two pieces to the puzzle that I didn't really fully understand. And finally, I was starting to put it together and it was all in an effort to help my husband. And so I did this and I worked with him for about a month. And in that time, we were able to balance his blood sugar. And it was awesome because we were sleeping through the night. His insulin pump wasn't waking us up. He was, you could sit next to him all day and you never know he was type 1 diabetic. So it was amazing. And I absolutely was thrilled. But the most shocking part was when I stepped on the scale and I had dropped 13 pounds in a month. And I'd been trying everything, my whole life to try to keep my weight maintained at what I thought was a normal weight. I'm 5'8". I thought I could maintain my weight at about 142 pounds. But as I started to inch closer into my 40s, I started gaining weight every year. As it gets harder the older you get. And I started blaming it on perimenopause. And I'm like 40 years old, blaming it on perimenopause. And I'm like, that just can't be right. I'm always looking for the truth. And so diving down into cellular biology, I was like, I need to understand why this is working here. Like I'm helping to support my husband's blood sugar. And I've done keto before. I did all meat back when it was Atkins for 9 months. And I, didn't really have any success. I'd lose 5 pounds and then I'd gain it back the next week. It was all water weight. So I needed to understand why this was working. And basically what it boils down to is I didn't fully understand how fat and meat affect your blood sugar. And when I finally put the pieces together and realized that that's our true fuel source, protein and fat are our fuel sources. Our body, does a process called gluconeogenesis that breaks protein into glucose. So we don't really need to eat any glucose. We just need to eat meat. And when I understood that and I started, seeing the results in hundreds of other women, it was like rinse and repeat. It's you can't fail when you do the right things. And as I developed the system, I took a step back and I looked at the biological components to all of this. And I realized this is how nature wants us to live. This is exactly in alignment with how it is in the wild and what we would be doing in the wild if we were still living as indigenous tribes. What would we be doing? We would be doing exactly the things that I'm having these girls do that are getting all these amazing results, right? And so that's kind of how we named it the Primal Bod, is because I knew that it was in perfect alignment with nature and our circadian hormones. And once you know that, you can't unknow it. And you see things so clearly at that point. So it was my goal to just go out and reach. I started working with the clients in my office. Our first group was called the Sugar-Free Warriors. We had 500 people in it overnight, and it was a huge success. So I told my husband, like, we got to do something bigger. So that's how Primal Bod got its start. And we are now in the thousands of women that we've helped lose weight, just like yourself, that never thought they could get it off, that never thought they could feel their best. The non-scale wins are just as big as, achieving your sexy body. It's so important to do it the right way, because when it comes down to weight loss, us women really, we have this thing in us that we know something's not right, but we're so uncomfortable in our skin that a lot of times we will do anything to get the weight to come off. That's why we see these people out here. That's why Ozempic is a thing. If we weren't willing to do anything to get the weight off, we wouldn't have these really crash diets and these drugs to try to help us get the weight off. But it's just that women for so long have been doing, decades now, have been doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing, that they've given up. Then they turn to drugs like Ozempic. So bringing the truth to the weight loss industry is really what I'm passionate about. And again, my second passion is, maybe my first, is helping pregnant nursing moms, because we got to pass this information on to our children. We need to teach our children. We have to empower our own brains to learn what we should have been taught in middle school, which is how to keep our blood sugar stable and what blood sugar really is and what the proper human diet is, because nobody knows it. They're given these government standards, which is the food pyramid. And that's is literally sad. It's literally called sad. There's a big responsibility on our shoulders to get it right.
Yeah, that's kind of what fueled this conversation for me, or what why I wanted to bring you on. Because I feel like we're getting the information late. And it's affecting us as we are growing these babies. It's affecting not just us, but also our children and future children. As we know, all these girls are born with all of their eggs for the rest of their lives. Like, this is a big deal. And I'm with you. That is like what I've been teaching in my courses and stuff. Shop on the outside of the store, and whole grains, and all this stuff that we've been taught that we think we know is best. And then to come to find out, like, but there's some, like, you just feel like something's off and you can't pinpoint it. And then you get information like this, you experience a change like this, and you're like, oh, okay, we've been lied to. Something's not right here. And when you bring it back to that primal, and
Yes.
you're like, oh, duh. Yes, of course. It all makes sense. Like, if we were in the wild and we didn't have access to all of these things at all the times of the year that we have right now, what would our diet really look like and how would it affect us? And so that's huge. In fact, one of the videos that you had posted where you're like, everybody needs to watch this, and I'm going to post this as well in the show notes, but fat fiction, that just about changed my life. Because this is a documentary, you guys, you can go and watch it for yourself. But to realize the ways that we've been lied to and how we continue to be lied to in a way that keeps us sick, so that we do end up needing hormones or other things because we are sick. Now we're replacing it with drugs instead of allowing our bodies to heal through food. That's huge. And I think the thing that kind of tipped me over here with wanting to talk to women is, and I think I had said this to you when I reached out to you, I know, and I've seen professionals use it, and I'm also fully aware of the brewer diet, for example, and the brewer diet is not what you do, but it is a high protein diet, and I have seen the effects of a high protein diet on women in pregnancy. It stops them from having gestational diabetes. It stops them from having preeclampsia. These are big life-changing things. If a woman has gestational diabetes when she is pregnant, her child is that much more likely to have type 2 diabetes later on in their life, among other things. And so, and you guys know that I'm always talking about, if you are healthy and low risk, then you are in the driver's seat. So this stuff, it's all part of it together. But realizing that, like listening to you talk about diabetes and insulin specifically, realizing as I'm listening to you, no, we have the key right here. We can solve it right here. If women truly understand this, you don't have to have gestational diabetes. And I understand what I'm saying is like, oh my gosh, it's like this big crazy thing, and people are probably going to come after me for it. I don't care. It's real. I've seen it. I've officially seen it, and I know the truth of it. So will you take a moment and talk about insulin and high protein and women that are pregnant and what they can do, like the very best things that they can do for their body right now, knowing what you know in regards to all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me start with just a little story of my own body and what I experienced as a pregnant mom, and then I'll get into what I changed, and I'll talk about insulin and why you see the high protein diet take away preeclampsia and gestational diabetes, because there's no really arguing the facts. It's just a fact of our biology. You can look it up in any anatomy physiology book, right? Diabetes, type 2 diabetes and gestational diabetes are totally reversible. You can totally reverse them. People do it all the time. So it's just learning how to eat, right? What's important to you? When I had Sean, my oldest son, I have 3 boys. And when I was pregnant with Sean, I was 19 years old. I gave birth when I was 20. So I was a very young mom. And at the time I was eating the standard American diet, but not really a good one. Like, we're talking fried pork chops and rice-a-roni. You remember the stuff from the 80s, I was still eating probably Top Ramen. I remember one time eating a whole entire package of double stuffed Oreo cookies in one day when I was pregnant with Sean. I did not develop gestational diabetes. I do not know how, but I ate a lot of carbs. I ate a lot of meat, and I got huge when I started pregnancy. I was about 140 pounds. And then I got really sick with morning sickness, terrible morning sickness for about 4 or 5 months. Now looking back, I know I was just completely depleted in nutrients. And that's why I developed morning sickness and my hormones were out of whack. But because you don't have to get morning sickness, that's a thing too. So I was just a sick cookie. I was just full of toxins and sick from eating the standard American diet my whole life. So I was 140 pounds when I started pregnancy, dropped down to like 135. I lost 5 pounds because I was so sick, dry heaving in the morning in the toilet. So lost some weight. Then from the time I was about 5 months pregnant until I gave birth and weighed in at 211 pounds. That's how much weight I gained. From the time I was 5 months pregnant, I just hit 5 months, and I put all that weight on. I mean, I was eating so much food. So, and then a lot of it, of course, was water weight. I did not have preeclampsia either, probably borderline though. So I had probably 3 or 4 yeast infections in that time period that I couldn't get rid of. It was probably just one yeast infection that I could never resolve. Gave birth and was sick. I was full of candida from all the sugar I had been eating. I was just very sick. I ended up developing mastitis in one of my breasts, and I had mastitis for 9 months straight. I was on an antibiotic every month for mastitis, could not get rid of it. And it was all because I was loaded with sugar. I was completely loaded with sugar. The bacteria in my body were just overgrown. I had full-on candida infection. Nursed him and then had to give up. I remember the day I gave up, I will never forget it. The nurse made me. I had 105 fever with mastitis, and she said, "You have to stop or you're going to die. You're going to get sepsis and we're not going to be able to save you." So I stopped nursing, and it was terrible because then I had to give Sean formula. He was 9 months old, so he didn't have to be on formula for long. But then as soon as a week after I started him on formula, he developed an ear infection. Then he had to get tubes in his ears. And I mean, the ear infections just didn't go away after that. So I was sick, he was sick, and I was just at my wit's end. I was like, should not be life. Something is wrong. Like, this is not right. And so my next pregnancy was a little bit better. I stopped eating junk food. I stopped eating a whole package of Oreo cookies, right? I stopped eating Top Ramen, and I would eat just like sandwiches and salads and, thought I was eating healthy. Instead of a donut for breakfast, I would have peanut butter toast, and I thought that was better. I got a little better because I wasn't eating so much toxic junk, but still not great. And then by my third pregnancy, I had started to kind of come around with the vegan diet. So I was vegan for 7 years. Unfortunately, it took me a long time to really get my shit together, but I was eating less protein, and I was thinking I was being healthier. I was eating a lot more fruits and vegetables and organic. At this point, I started to introduce organic into my life. This was 17 years ago. It was my youngest son, who's 17 now. And I started to do more organic things and vegetables and produce and eat a lot of that with just a little bit of meat, and that pregnancy was one of my hardest. And my contractions actually stopped during that pregnancy. They had to break my water. It was really bad. And I didn't gain as much weight because I wasn't really eating that much food, but I was chronically fatigued. I became severely anemic. It was horrible. Had diarrhea. Like, it was just a terrible experience. So I have a lot I want to fix. I wish I could go back now. Every day I wake up and think, gosh, if I could only just go back and know what I know now, my babies would be so healthy, because now they have problems still. They're grown men now, but they've fought with acne. They have gut issues. They have a weakened immune system. And it's because I did all the wrong stuff. I did everything wrong when I was pregnant with them. So now it's my joy to be able to come in and swoop in and have you guys learn from me, because that's really like that. You just take my word for it. It's not fun when you're a new mom, the overwhelming pressure you feel of having to make sure this baby is okay is real. And so you want to make sure you're doing everything you possibly can to support your body through that process, because you're a mom now. You're raising somebody else. You're keeping this little tiny thing alive. So let's get onto the insulin thing, because I think that's really where I think we're going to hit some big wins with helping women, because my blood sugar was a disaster my entire pregnancies. I had no idea. And then right before I married Tom, my blood sugar was a disaster before I learned my secret. So I had bad blood sugar my whole life, and I had no idea. And I would get hangry, and I always knew, like, well, I just need to keep eating something, right? I have a little hypoglycemia, but no one really understands what hypoglycemia is. So hypoglycemia it's not low blood sugar as much as it's hyperinsulin, okay? Because your blood is balanced at 1 teaspoon of sugar. That's not a lot of sugar in the blood, is it? But what we eat equates to a lot more. So like 1 cup of basmati rice has the equivalent to 11 teaspoons of sugar in it. That's what it breaks down to in your blood. So all the food you eat is going to break down to 2 things. It's either going to break down to fat, which is lipids, or it's going to break down to glucose, which is sugar. And so it doesn't matter. Even meat can break down to sugar. But your essential nutrients are fat and protein and glucose and water. Of course, water is very vital as well. But those are the essential nutrients, and all meat breaks down to glucose. And it does it in a very nice, stable way. So there's certain cells in our body that need glucose. That's the red blood cells, the inner medulla of the kidney, parts of the brain. Your ovaries will need some glucose to drop an egg. And so those cells depend on glucose. So that's why people will tell you, they'll say wrongly, you need carbohydrates. Your body needs carbohydrates to stay alive. That is false. Carbohydrates are not necessary for our body. Glucose is necessary for our body. And we can get glucose out of the meat we eat, and that's how we should get it. So we don't need plant matter. We do not. It is not a biological need of us to have a carbohydrate. We only need glucose. So glucose is our form of energy, and that's why we use it, but we can also burn fat for energy too. So the cells that burn fat for energy contain mitochondria. And the mitochondria can burn glucose if they want to, they can, or they can burn fat. They prefer to burn fat. And the mitochondria take up more real estate in your body than the cells that don't have mitochondria. So the cells that don't have mitochondria, they need the glucose. Those are the red blood cells, the ones I just named. The cells that do have mitochondria, which are every other cell in your body, and those cells are high concentration in your heart and your brain. And those cells need or fire on ketones. So they love burning ketones, which are a metabolite from your fat, which basically means they can burn fat and they can produce energy. So all the mitochondria in your cells make your energy. And they do that from either using ketone bodies from fat or glucose from the food you break down. And when they run on glucose, so if you're not able to access your fat stores and get into ketosis, when they run on glucose, they tend to run hot. They get overheated. The cells get overheated. And it creates this glycolysis to happen, which is really a fermentation of the cell. And that fermentation then leads into something called the Warburg effect. And the Warburg effect is where cancer starts. So this is what I was doing when I was discovering my truth, which is this is how nature wants us to live, which is in ketosis. I realized, well, those mitochondria do not like burning sugar. They want to burn ketones. And so we should always be in some form of low state of ketosis. Even if it's 0.1 on the meter, we should be burning fat for our mitochondria. So that, and I know I'm getting a little like, you're like, wait a minute, Candi, I'm going to tie it all back together, I promise. So that led me to understand the role that insulin has to play. When you have a high insulin environment in your body, insulin sits on your fat cells and you can't access them. Okay, so that's why people get hypoglycemic, because their body is producing so much insulin, they're unable to tap into those fat stores for fuel, and their body starts to panic and makes them hungry again and wants to elevate the blood sugar. The other thing that happens when you're hypoglycemic or you're overproducing insulin is that you end up having lows where your body produces too much insulin. It does a really great job of getting the sugar down and out of the blood. And so you get this effect where it drops your blood sugar. And that's what everyone gets confused on with diabetes is they don't understand. They think it's a low blood sugar thing, and it's really a too much insulin, because insulin is the hormone that takes the glucose into the cell. And so it gets it out of the bloodstream and it puts it inside the cell. So it does lower your blood the sugar in your blood, but it puts it into the cell where it belongs, right? So insulin is the reason your blood sugar goes low. It's not usually because you haven't eaten. I mean, that takes weeks because our bodies can make its own sugar. We can make our own sugar off of the meat on our own bodies. So it takes weeks and weeks for you to starve, right? But the reason people get the hypoglycemic feeling is because they're producing so much insulin because their body's panicked. Their body's saying, this blood sugar is elevated all the time. We can't get it down. So we got to constantly keep insulin flooding through the bloodstream to keep the blood sugar down. And then when the body hears that signal, your brain develops this neural network. And it says, okay, we're constantly eating sugar. We're constantly eating glucose. We got to keep the blood sugar down. And so then you've learned that. So then when you have a moment where maybe you ate just a hamburger patty, right? But prior to that, you've been eating bowls of oatmeal and all kinds of carbs. And then all of a sudden you just have a hamburger patty and you crash. This is why people crash on the keto diet in the first week. And you get shaky and you're like, oh, it's because your body went, oh, they ate food. Here comes the insulin that we know you're going to need, even though now you haven't eaten the food to equate the amount of insulin your body's set point is set to produce, then you crash because you have too much insulin now. And that brings the blood sugar too low. And your body has checkpoints to raise it back up again, but it doesn't feel good when it gets low like that. Now, the root of that problem of overproducing insulin is that you develop diabetes through that because you produce too much for too long, and then your cells do something where they become resistant to it, and that's insulin resistance. And that is the start to type 2 diabetes and even with gestational diabetes, right? You're just producing too much insulin. And so you're fat because insulin's a fat storing hormone. Remember, it sits on the fat cells and it locks the fat into place. And you're also feeling hungry, starving, shaking all the time because your blood sugar is so low because you've got too much insulin all the time, constantly trying to get your blood sugar down because you're eating things that you haven't biologically adapted to eat. You're not adapted to eat that many carbs because they're not in the true wild. They're not in the wild. The fruits and vegetables, I just did a reel on this, and it's so controversial to people because they're, it's like waking up a sleepwalker. You don't want to wake up. You don't want to like shake a sleepwalker awake. You need to slowly nudge them. And that's what I feel like we're doing on our Instagram reels right now. But man, I had to shake them awake today on our Instagram reel, which is, the true wild does not have surplus of fruits and vegetables like you see in the grocery store. Those have been selectively bred to be the way that they are. Okay. We would not have eaten that food in the wild. There's no way. It doesn't grow like that. That took us, we've been selective breeding since 8,000 BC. So that took us thousands and thousands and thousands of years to end up from a wild celery to the celery you see in the supermarket today. But that wild celery is highly toxic. You wouldn't eat it. You would not eat it. You'd spit it out because it's toxic. And even the domesticated celery you see in the grocery store today is not great for you. So it's not our proper human diet. And Western medicine would like you to believe that your servings of all your whole grains and your fruits and vegetables, and that's going to make you grow your baby strong. And that couldn't be further from the truth. That is the thing that is going to wreck your blood sugar and weaken your development of your child, weaken your gut bacteria, make you store more toxins, right? Which we dump into our children. We dump our toxins into our fetus. That's what happens. And you will end up in a worse state of health trying to eat what everybody else is telling you is healthy. So yeah, it's all about conquering the world around us because we have been fed so many lies. There's so much corruption, and it's all people, you guys. It's all people and their stupid ideas they get. And then for some reason, one sticks and everybody else listens and they think that's the way it is. And it's not. And we haven't been able to pass the true information down. It got lost, through the wars and through stressful events like the Great Depression, Industrial Revolution. That information got lost. And so now we're trying to feel our way around. That's why people have to YouTube how to do now. I mean, literally, you can YouTube how to change your baby's diaper, as if it's not natural to us to know how to clean our infant. But there are people now that have to YouTube that. That's how removed we are from our natural wild state. So all you have to do is understand nature, and then you'll know this is what I would eat. Just picture yourself, but prior to agriculture, which was 10,000 years ago, picture what you would do 13,000 years ago before they had agriculture. And how would you live if you were out in the wild? What would you eat? Right? The first thing you would be doing is you'd be trying to learn how to hunt, because it's just in our nature. We're the apex predator. That's what we do. And you'd be trying to find some meat. Even I like we did a reel about the show Naked and Afraid, and one of the girls came on that was on Naked and Afraid, and she said, Candi's right. I was on that show. The wild does not contain an abundance of plants for you to eat. It does not. And you better be darn careful if you decide to eat plants out there, because you don't want to end up dead, because there are more plants that will kill you than aren't. So you just have to know what the wild is. And you have to understand that at a deep level. And when you do, you'll know that what your proper human food is, which is meat. Meat is your proper human food. Meat and animal fat are what is going to grow your baby strong, give it a strong immune system, make your breast milk like perfect so that you grow that baby's brain and that you're healthy through the entire process of that, because that's nature wants you to procreate and bring in healthy children to go on and further that population. That's what we were designed to do.
Yeah, it's crazy as you're talking about this, that we have to be retaught what should just be normal. But we have been, over time with the way that food is today, and we think we're doing the best things for us. And also it's extremely overcomplicated. One of my favorite things about what we're doing with Primal Bod is it's like, how hard is it to figure out how to cook some meat with some healthy fat and maybe add a little bit of whatever sounds good on the side in the way of a small amount of vegetables or something like that? How hard is that? It simplified everything, including the way that I feed my kids. And so we make things so complicated. Here I am worrying about trying to get sourdough from scratch and all this stuff I was doing on the side and making these like big meals to try and fill everybody up. And it's like, you're making it so hard for no reason. And the other side of that is, if people aren't seeing the truth in what you're saying, which I cannot imagine by the time we're done here that is going to be the case, but I know there's a lot of work to do. But I'm like, you just look around, you brought clarity to that. You're like, look at these pictures from the 60s and 70s. If you guys watch her stuff, right? She talks about like, look at pictures of people at the beach and walking around in the 60s and 70s versus now. Like, we are in an extreme. There is the amount of diabetes and obesity. Like, it's an epidemic now. It is a very big problem. And if we're doing that while we were pregnant, we're not only causing the problems for ourselves, we are handing it down. And so that's why I think it's such like a big thing, a huge thing that you're talking about now. I did kind of want to move into, since you've gone over insulin and you've talked about the high protein and animal, I want to talk about the protein for a second, because even something that I have said, if you're not getting enough protein for the day, add in a protein shake. Now I understand why that's not a good idea. But will you talk about the sources of protein and how much pregnant women should really be getting? I want people to hear the reality of that.
Yes. So I'll tell you what I would have done if I could go back and be pregnant again. I would eat nothing but meat, because I know too much now. I know that that's the proper human diet. I would definitely probably be on the high end of 200 to 250 grams of protein a day. While I was pregnant, I would eat more. I would not stop myself. I would try to eat as much fat as I wanted, and that's the fatty cuts of meat, like the ribeye, because in tribal tradition, they save the fattiest parts of the animal for the pregnant or nursing mom because they understand that that fat contains DHA, and DHA grows a baby's brain. So the more fat the mom gets, the smarter that child's going to get. So we need to be eating that fat during pregnancy. It's really important for brain development. So I would be eating minimum 200 to 250 grams of protein a day, and maybe even more. It depends. I would walk a lot. That's pretty much, I would walk and do some squatting, try to do the squatting position every day. Squatting is really good. You got to keep your legs strong during labor and pregnancy. So yeah, I would just, like you said, I could talk all day about insulin and the mechanisms behind it, and it's good to know. It's really good to understand. I really recommend everybody go check out Dr. Ben Bikman because he has it nailed. He has all the research behind it. What I learned was through my husband, through the type 1 diabetes, and Ben Bikman confirmed it for me. I didn't find him until after I figured it all out, but I could talk till I'm blue in the face about insulin. And a lot of people still, it's a hard concept to grasp. That's why I always go back to what's the wild like, you guys? Look at nature. Nature's telling you right now that we're not doing anything right because we can't procreate anymore. There are 25-year-olds that can't get pregnant. That is a huge problem. So nature's trying to tell us you're not doing it right. This is wrong, right? It's like the game of hot and cold that you play with your kids, and you send your kid into the room, you hide an object and they have to go find it, and you guide them by saying, you're hot, you're close to it, or you're cold, you're far away. Nature is telling humanity right now, you're cold. You are in Antarctica. You are not doing the right thing. You're sick, you're diseased, you look terrible, you're on drugs. It's a problem. Just look at nature. You don't have to completely understand everything about blood sugar. All you need to know is your blood is balanced at 1 teaspoon. And if you keep annihilating your body with carbohydrate all day long, you're going to overproduce insulin. It's going to make you gain excess weight and store fat, and you're going to develop insulin resistance later down the road, which leads to type 2 diabetes. So this is the thing it's just that simple. They had a really great study, which everybody should go look at. It's called Pottinger's Cats on Weston A. Price Foundation. They have it on there. Pottinger's Cats. Dr. Pottinger was a doctor studying tuberculosis back in the 30s, I believe, in California. And he was using the adrenal glands of cats to see if he could find a cure for tuberculosis. And what he would do is he would take these adrenals out of the cats. And what was happening was the cats were staying alive even after they had their adrenal glands removed. So he thought it was very interesting. So he started kind of working further on the cats. Everybody in the community caught on to what he was doing, and they were bringing him all these wild cats. And so he got an enormous amount of cats, and then he couldn't feed them, right? Because the cats that he was feeding were eating scrap meat that had been delivered from the butcher. And so they were eating scrap meat and scrap fish heads and whatever. And then he didn't have enough food. So he started feeding them cooked table scraps and sweetened condensed milk and things he had laying around. And all of a sudden he started watching, this went on for years, and he started watching the cats that were fed the sweetened condensed milk and the cooked foods, right, which was not a species-specific diet for the cats. They started developing disease. And so he started kind of testing it out and feeding them more processed foods and non-species foods. And he watched them after 7 generations of feeding cats bad food. They stopped procreating. They couldn't have babies anymore. The females became aggressive and the males became docile. So isn't that interesting? What do we see happening right now? It's happening to us. We are eating a non-species specific diet. We are not meant to eat these selectively bred plants that used to be highly toxic that are now just halfway toxic, and not eating our true food, which is meat. So we're starving. We're starving ourselves. And that is not going to be good for the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria that live inside your cell, the last little point I'll make on this, they're passed down from the mother. So you are passing your mitochondria on to your children, right? And then it only passes down from mothers. So if you have 3 girls, your mitochondria will live on in 3 other ways. I have 3 boys, so my mitochondria dies with them because men do not pass on mitochondria. Only women do. So it is so important as women that we take care of our mitochondria. And remember what I said, they like to burn ketones. They like to burn fat. So they don't like burning sugar. They get hot, overheated. It creates inflammation, which leads to cancer. Okay. They want to burn cool, and burning ketones helps cool the system down. So it's really very, very important to understand that keeping that mitochondria happy is so important because they tell your DNA and RNA how to express. They're the ones that say, be positive or be negative, right? Negative is cancer. It's ill health. Positive is abundance of energy and vitality. And if you're not keeping your mitochondria happy, then they're not going to do that inside your body. So it's set up on a system to work with nature. And if you don't listen to nature, then you're screwed. You're going to live in the life of domestication. Look what's happened to our dogs and our cats, right? The dogs used to be wolves. They're not wolves anymore. They're domesticated. They're weak. They're sick. They die early, and they live terrible lives because we feed them food that isn't good for them. The protein is you need a lot, basically. You need a lot of protein, and you need a lot of the healthy animal fats that come with it. If you can get your hands on bone marrow, raw dairy, all of that is great. If you want to eat fruit, eat fruit. Fruit is probably the least toxic out of all the plant kingdom. Eat it in season when it's seasonally. You can absolutely have fruit. Eat an abundance of raw dairy and cheeses. There's a lot of women out there going carnivore, but you don't have to. If you want to keep eating veggies, you can. The thing is just don't eat sleeves of Oreo cookies all day long like I did, right? Do your best. Just do your best. Just know that a bowl of oatmeal will do the same thing to your blood sugar as a bowl of ice cream will. Okay. So all those carbs, a slice of bread, a protein shake, because protein breaks down to glucose too. And when you pulverize it and dry it, it's pretty much like a milkshake on your blood sugar. So you need to know that just eat meat, real meat from the store, eat as much as you can, and use veggies as condiments. If you want to have avocado, if you want to have some macadamia nuts, eat the healthy fats like that. That's totally fine. Just stay away from the processed garbage and, the junk.
Yeah. And I was going to comment on the protein because I know people that are listening that hear you say like 200 grams of protein, it's like you're just kind of like taken back by it a little bit. So even when I started in on the diet, it was funny, or diet, I don't know, program, I started eating heavier amounts of protein. Now my body is absolutely craving this, right? In the beginning, it felt hard to do because I was eating all the other junk. But once you get going, your body starts like, oh, yes, finally, thank you. Yes, this is what I want. And you start craving more of it. So
yes,
eating 200, when I'm coming up, like right now I'm ovulating, for example, when I'm coming up to ovulation, 200, I'm about 180 to 200 every month because I'm hungry for it. And that's what my body wants. So your body, it does kick in. You will crave it, and your body will tell you when it's hungry for it. So it's all kind of that natural process.
Yep. I will easily eat 250 grams of protein a day. I'm 136 pounds. I'm 5'8", and I will put back 250 grams of protein a day on a day that I'm hungry for it. So do not feel ashamed or bad about eating that much meat ever. Your body needs it to build all your tissues and your baby's tissue.
Yeah. The other thing that you talked about was kind of, that like drop where you're like, I'm feeling hangry, or, we've got blood sugar or whatever that's happening and it's just making you feel so hungry. One of the things I was concerned about is if I'm just eating meat and fat and a little bit of this stuff on the side, am I going to be hungry? And I haven't been. That blew my mind because I've done all different kinds of diets, and I'm hungry all the time. time, or you do like the carb cycling when you're trying to get some muscle and, whatever. And it's like, I just feel
Mhm.
like I'm dead at all times. The other thing that comes along with this, the thing that
Mhm.
we talk about all the time that happens during pregnancy and postpartum are these mood disorders, right? Depression and anxiety and anger and all of this stuff that goes away along with the brain fog, along with the mommy brain, that goes away when you are fueling yourself properly in this way. That blew my mind too. On top of that, for the
Yeah.
girls that are listening, your libido. And I mean, your husbands are going to be all excited about it, right? I know mine was, but I was floored. I was like, I just thought I'm
Absolutely.
busy and tired and it just is what it is. And I'm getting older, like not that we
Yep.
don't hang out or we don't want to, but it became more of like I got to make sure and get it on
Oh,
the
yeah.
calendar instead of like, hey, you're cute, let's do this. So that's a
Yep.
big deal. I mean, for men and women. So I look at all of these things and
And you should
yeah,
yes. You should have a sex drive while you're pregnant and while you're nursing. That should not go away. If it does, that's a problem. You need to eat more meat, girlfriend. If that goes away, you got to eat more meat. You're just not eating enough meat and healthy fat because it comes back. I mean, like I've had women in their 60s get their sex drive back and they've been dead since they were 30 down there. And they're like, I haven't wanted to have sex since I was 30 years old and now I can't get enough. And they're in their 60s and their husbands are like, what's happening? And it's because they're nourishing their bodies
yeah.
finally.
You also mentioned fertility. Like, that's huge. I talk about fertility on here and understanding your cycle and things, and that's all great. That's all good information. But how can you actually create fertility? Like that, it's a normal process of life, but we have so many issues with it. And we can talk all day long about birth control and all these other things that we shouldn't be doing that totally screw that stuff up. But just think about how we're just the messing up of the hormones and things, even just that alone by what we're eating it's just kind of crazy. And so I've had to worry. So I actually, I don't know that you know about this, Candi, about me, but I have 3 boys as well. They were all born 2 years apart. And we planned to have 6 kids. We just always wanted a big family. And when we went to get pregnant again, which I did a little bit more of a gap that time, I'm like, let's do 3 years. I'm kind of worn out. Couldn't get pregnant. And couldn't get pregnant and couldn't get pregnant. And so we had, went through all the doctors and testing and all this stuff. We have unexplained secondary infertility. And now I'm scared out of my mind that I am going to get pregnant because my cycle is, extending again and I'm having less spotting during ovulation. Just things that I'm like, oh, shoot.
You're
But how
Yep.
exciting and how cool. Like, okay, maybe not for my time. Like, I feel like I'm done now and that ship has sailed. But for women that are
Yep.
listening, I want you guys to hear that because it is so powerful that if you were dealing with infertility issues, what we're putting into our bodies can have a huge, huge
Yes.
effect on it. So I feel like in all the ways,
Yeah.
it
Well,
affects everything.
Dr. Kiltz is a good one.
Say that again.
Yeah, Dr. Kiltz is a good one. You should have him on the show, Stephanie, because he's great. But PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is cysts on the ovaries, which will block you from getting pregnant, is diabetes of the ovaries. That's what it is. It's all insulin related. It's too much insulin has hit the ovary for too long. Endometriosis, polyps, cysts, fibroids, all of that stuff is connected back to a high insulin environment. It's too much sugar in the blood for too long. The body has to produce the insulin. It's irritating to the body. And so that all that hormonal dysfunction is linked to metabolic dysfunction. So yes, getting control over your diet and your blood sugar right away, you won't have any issues. We see it reverse all the time. I get girls constantly in my program who are trying to get pregnant. Then they get pregnant. They have to put the program on
Yeah,
pause because they get pregnant during the program.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yep, I do
Okay.
too.
This is a
Yep.
question I'm constantly asked, and so I would love to hear from you. Supplements. What would you recommend, or if you go back and you were to do it yourself again, what are those supplements that you would absolutely make sure to take? Those things that are really good for us to take, even when we're eating all the good food while we are pregnant and postpartum nursing.
Well, I think that it's controversial. I'm not a big supplement person. I don't really like the supplements, fish oil, or eat a can of sardines every day, with the DHA in it. You should be getting fish oil for the DHA for the baby's brain. Folate. Folate is really important, but you can get that in egg yolk and liver. We didn't have prenatal vitamins at our fingertips out in the wild. For thousands of years, you guys, prenatal vitamins are a new thing, right? And the reason we have them is because our diet is so poor. We didn't need them to become the apex predator of the planet. We did not need that to happen. We didn't need prenatals. So if you choose a prenatal, choose wisely. Choose a whole foods prenatal vitamin from a practitioner grade supplement company. Don't just go out there and wing it. Do not go on Centrum from Walgreens. That shit is horribly toxic for you and your baby. But you want to get iodine is another big one. You want to get iodine in for you and your baby. I'd say go check out Dr. Brownstein's stuff. I know you probably talk a little bit about the iodine stuff, Stephanie, but iodine, DHA, and folate are the things you really want. And liver is really high in folate. So if you can take a really good grass-fed beef liver supplement or get your own beef liver or chicken liver and cook it up and eat it yourself, that's highly beneficial. Eat a little bit every day to get your folate in. So you don't need to get it from foliage like they tell you or all your fruits and vegetables. You need it from the organ meats from liver, and egg yolk is really high in folate as well. So yeah, I mean, you can do the supplements if you want, but they're really not necessary if you eat the proper human diet.
I do want to give you an opportunity to, will you take a chance and talk about Primal Bod? I mean, this is kind of what you're using right now to be able to reach women. And it's obviously changed my life. My husband actually joined the men's program, so it's changed both of our lives. He's not a before and after picture taker,
awesome.
But he looks really good. But overall, I think we just feel so good. I want to spread the news far and wide. So take a moment and talk about that program, if you would.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're not working with pregnant and nursing women right now. I'd love to have a program for that. That's probably going to come down in the future, but for right now, we're not. But when you get ready, when you're done nursing your baby, which is the most important thing, I know you work with pregnancy, but the next step is nursing. And it is literally the most important thing. The biggest regret I have in my life is not being able to nurse my babies longer. And I nursed them all until they were 9 months old or 10 months old. And then I had to stop. But that is the biggest regret of my life. And I've done a lot of shitty, stupid things. So that is a huge one, ladies. Take time, nurse your baby till they're 2 if they want to, right? You'll never get the opportunity back to do that again. So please breastfeed your baby. It may be painful in the first week or so. Hire someone who knows what they're doing to help you, or get a friend who's done it before. Okay. There's no excuse to not nurse. I don't care if you have inverted nipples. I don't care what the story is. We figured out a way in nature to do it. So you have to buck up, girls. You got to buck up and you got to do it, because goat's milk and all the other natural alternatives for baby food, they're not your breast milk. They aren't even close to your breast milk. So please don't do that to your child. You have to nurse. I had mastitis for 9 months and I nursed my babies through that pain and still made it happen. And you guys can do it too. Okay. So that's the big one for me, is the nursing. Now back to the Primal Bod is a weight loss program. It's really the only weight loss program, the only true one, because we get to the root of the problem, which is we're not eating the right foods. And it's really like a college course, wouldn't you say, Stephanie? You're learning so much.
I have to watch and rewatch
about your body, the anatomy, physiology, the blood sugar. You'll understand it all. By the time you're done with the program, you will understand how it all works, how insulin works, how your glycogen stores work, how to get into ketosis and stay there safely, because you can wreck your metabolism going too high on ketones and getting into too deep of levels of ketosis, because it mimics famine in nature. And anytime you're in famine in nature, your body's going to shut down. It's going to say, we're going to preserve. So it'll slow your thyroid function, slow your metabolism down, and you'll end up, feeling frustrated. So don't do that. You want to do it the right way. And it's all inside the program. But when you're done nursing your babies, you can come along, join the program. It's fantastic. There's no one that it hasn't helped. We've helped thousands of women now. And not only do they have the body they've always wanted, but they feel their most vibrant, authentic selves come through.
Yeah, that's been my favorite part. It's like body part is great. Yes, of course, I'd like to look good in the mirror and good for my husband, but everything else that comes on is like, whoa, I can't believe that this is my life now. It's so good.
Yep.
So, well, thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Love
Thank
it,
you for what you're
girlfriend.
doing. Thank you for spreading the message far and wide. I just feel like
Yes.
it's so important. I hope that this helps, and I just hope you keep speaking because we need it. We absolutely need it. So thank you.
I don't plan on shutting up, Stephanie, and it's going to take us, like me and you and us women who are bold enough to figure out how to do podcasts and get the word out to help as many women as we can. So mad respect for you, girlfriend. Thank you for having me on your show. I think it's great. And I wish all your pregnant mamas the best of luck.
Thank you. Make sure that you check out Candi's Instagram at the Primal Bod on Instagram, and also take a look at her website, even if it's just for the future, for that Primal Bod program, and that is primalbod.com. Remember, I'll have all this information in the show notes, all the clickable links, so that you can get in touch with her and ask me any questions that you guys have when you are done being pregnant and breastfeeding like you are doing right now, and you are interested in looking more into how to fuel your body, how to fuel not just your body, but your children and your husband, really getting back to that primal lifestyle. You've heard here today, it has really changed my life. So I have a coupon code for you guys. That is MEB100 for $100 off of her program when you guys are ready to do that. I love what Candi does. She takes you through step by step. She's there for questions and whatever you need along the way. So I hope you guys do check it out. Like I said, even if just for the future and just for fun, you should really be on her Instagram. She really is shaking things up, and it's just really, really neat to learn all that new fun stuff that she's kind of throwing at people right now. But with that, I will see you guys next week.